Hey guys, welcome to our very first episode of the Wang Time, and we're stoked to be here today. And we'll continue making these episodes, and in each one of them, we just talk about different topics. And so, in today's episode, we'll be going over the question: are we living in a simulation? Today, here we got our co-host Henry
What's up?
and Anant.
Hey, our guests. So if you guys have any topics that you would want us to do in our further episodes, please drop a comment down below on our YouTube channel. If you're listening on any other platforms, go over to our YouTube channel, subscribe to Eugene. He has some great videos.
Yeah. And so this is our main guest, Anant, here today. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey guys, my name's Anant. So all three of us were going into grade 11 in the same school. I think I've been chosen for this episode because I tend to get really excited when talking about simulations and things like that. But yeah, I'm just happy to be here.
Alright, that's great. Okay, so let's start
Let's
off.
get started. So
Yeah.
Anand, what do you think? What are your initial thoughts about us living in a simulation? Or
I really think that the idea of living in a simulation is something really new, and the first research about this was published in 2001, which kind of tells us that as humanity's progressing, they're not only trying to get evolved in a sense of life and evolving in a social manner, but they're also trying to kind of find out what purpose they have and things like that. And that's where the idea of a simulation comes in. Because if we can make simulations, if we can do things like that, then why aren't we believing that even others can? What do you think is more likely, guys? The idea of ghosts, which so many people in religions believe in, or the idea of simulations, which we already kind of do on our own?
yeah, I agree. It's more like scientifically possible compared to conspiracy theories.
Going back to your point about how simulations are quite recent, I think philosophers even from back in the days, they thought that there is a possibility that we are all living in a world where we have set rules, because in all simulations the rules are set, The Sims or whatever, and so we're living in that world. And so nowadays people like Elon Musk, they argue for the fact that we are living in a simulation, because they have this idea how civilizations, as technology develops, as we develop, technology also develops, and we can create video games and virtual realities where we can simulate a lot of things. So there is the possibility that another civilization has created this, just like their game, and we're living in their game basically. But then there's also the ethical issues about if these people really feel pain and have to go through this process of death or whatever, is it ethical to do this? And so I think that's another point we have to take into consideration.
Personally, I think the idea of simulations is very on the edge, because you kind of have to go both ways. When you're talking about simulations, on one side you have to assume that they don't exist, on one side you have to assume they exist. And kind of you have to go both ways in a sense, because for example, if they exist, then what's kind of the purpose of them simulating us?
Yeah.
If they have enough power to do simulations, then are we just entertainment, or are we a way to computational? Because at the end of the day, why would they waste their computational power on something like a simulation? And if we're simulated, then what stops them? What stops the idea that there are a million simulations they're running at the same time, right?
Yep.
So what do you think about that, Henry?
Yeah, so I was just thinking, if we do figure out that we are living in a simulation, do you think there would be any differences in how we live our life from then on, after knowing that we're all just characters in a game? Do you think the world's gonna fall apart because people have to kind of regrasp the meaning of existence?
I think how you said, we have to know whether we don't know whether our simulation is for entertainment, video games we basically play for entertainment, The Sims, or whether they're trying to get something out of the simulation, trying to simulate different possibilities into the future about what their world is going to be like. And so yeah, going back to Henry's question about how life would change, I don't think life would change that much. There would just be more research into this field of like
Right.
quantum computers and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because if you talk about simulations, then to be simulated, there could essentially be two paths, right? So either a very deterministic path, where basically the future of us, humanity, which is being simulated, is already decided. But on the other hand, a simulation could be that what we're doing is in our control, but it's not essentially like real. And even like real or not real, the idea of life is such like a human concept. Like humans, everything in this world is made out of things that aren't considered alive. But when they come together, they make something alive. So you know what I mean? It's just things like that which make you think about what life is. And I think that's why the idea of a simulation is very popular.
Well, I'm just trying to hold back my cough.
Right.
You ask it.
Okay, so now this leads us nicely onto our first topic. So you know the concept vs free will. What are your thoughts about that?
Right, so I kind of think that when looking at simulations, it's important because we don't really know much about it, it's just speculation. It's important to explore as many different ideas as possible. And that's why I think on one side, you have to assume that everything's like a very deterministic universe where all of us, all of humanity's actions and consequences are already decided by the computer and they're set, and we're just running it through. Like we're just experiencing it. But on the other hand, it could be like we have the freedom to make choices, but the computer is just processing it. So if the second part was true, then why should we even care we're living in a simulation, right? Shouldn't we just live life as it is? And that's why the idea of simulations is like so popular because it kind of makes you think about life in general, like a universe where laws exist, where essentially the thing that makes up everything like atoms and stuff is considered dead. But when they come together, it makes something alive. It's just that concept and that idea, which kind of allows you to think of things like simulation. Because if something like that is possible, why not? Why wouldn't simulations be possible? And this kind of leads me to the point I wanted to bring up is that how much do you think religion and culture, things like that, kind of adhere to this point of simulations?
So you know how in like many religions there are different like beliefs and stories about these mythological stories about like gods or heroes that lived many years ago. Do you think this could be maybe like clues towards that we are living under a sort of higher power above us controlling what we do, and we as like humans or characters in this game worship them, and that's what religion is all about?
That's interesting to think about. Thinking of like a higher power making all our moves, do you think we are being controlled, or we have like the ability to make our own decisions and then the higher power makes the final decision?
Right. I think that's very interesting because I recently like read this thing that whenever humanity comes close to ending, it's like we kind of just the simulation. Okay, either it's a simulation or it's like parallel world theory, that you just shift to a parallel world where this happens, where there are like really minute changes. And that's why this thing called the Mandela Effect is become really popular. Like for example, you remember as a kid in the movie Snow White, it was like mirror, mirror on the wall. Yeah. And now when people look back at it, it's like magic mirror on the wall. Whereas all this time we actually believed it was mirror, mirror. Another example, Luke, I am your father. In the actual movie, he doesn't say Luke, he just says I am your father. But millions, billions of people remember it as Luke, I am your father. So there are many theories that either it's like a very interesting societal movement that's happened, or we've just shifted to a parallel universe. What do you guys think about that? I know it's a bit far-fetched, but
I think the ideas of parallel universes are it's possible that they exist, right? Because
I definitely think there are other universes out there where we are also in that universe but living in a different form.
So it's like a different there's like different scenarios for each action we take, then that leads to another set of universes.
So I say that I believe that every decision that we make, it changes the path of the universe in a sense. Like say I take this plate and smash it on the ground right now, that brings us off the current path,
Right.
and
Right.
we'll have to.
So
in
there'll be
another
one-
universe, we'll have to clean it up.
Right.
While
right.
in the previous universe, we would still
We
continue.
It
just
didn't
to
break
walk
in
out.
the first place.
So that, with that concept, right, with the 7 billion people on Earth, every single decision that each person makes
Yeah, I
would
get what you
bring
mean. I get
start
what
a
you
brand new universe.
Mhm.
Then that would mean that there are. I don't want to think about how many
Yeah, so
copies
if you think
of the
about it,
same,
like, it's like
Earth.
infinite.
Yeah.
Because essentially
amount of-
every
yeah.
second you're making a decision, right? You're choosing not to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only humans, it's like other things as well. Like, for example, when a leaf falls off a tree, right? Even something like
Yeah.
that could
Something
happen.
that
Right,
small.
right. So it's just like, it's infinity basically, right? Because
Mhm.
there's so many possibilities.
And these ideas are like really prevalent in movies like The Flash, like
Right,
like the
right.
TV series Flash, or the movie Doctor Strange, where something is put out of place and you have to go back in time to replace that.
And I think that's why Eugene, stuff like The Flash or The Truman Show, movies like that are really interesting because it not only makes us think about that, but humans as a species are really interested to find their purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I kind of think about simulations as like, if some people, like, that's why religion is so important, because people feel like there's someone above them who's always protecting them, right? They feel empowered in a way.
Yep.
And if it was a simulation, would they still feel that, would they feel that the person who's making the simulation is kind of like their god, or would they just not believe in the idea of a god anymore?
Yeah, so I just had this random thought just now while you were saying that. So you know how slowly in the past couple of hundred of years, religion has become less and less as important than it was before. Like
Mhm.
back in the day, most people had a common religion with their community, and now there's a existence of like atheists, people who don't believe in religions per se. Do you think that could be a sign that humans are starting to figure out that we might be living in a simulation, and that it's a natural way of us coming to the realization that we are being controlled by someone above? That's why we refuse to believe that.
Mm-hmm. Like, as technology develops, we see alternative options rather than what a lot of people believed back in the days. And so having an alternative view to the world and how it functions, and whether we're living in a simulation or not, is like something people are really starting to think into now.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like, as science moves on, it kind of gives us more freedom to think about new ideas, because only when we discover like new aspects of life do we kind of get the option to then be like, okay, if this is true, then why shouldn't this be true? So yeah, I think that's why, like, as humanity is just discovering new things, inventing new things. For example, like, if the computer hadn't been invented, we wouldn't have even thought about simulations, right? Yeah.
Uh-huh. And so when you said whether we know this is true or not, something popped up in my mind, and this is about, like, how do we know something is true or real if we're not looking at it? Like, how do I know, like, the other countries exist when I'm not looking at it? And so, like, there was this story some philosopher came up with, and he said that if a man is born in a cave and chained to, like, the wall, and he only sees the shadows, and there's, like, people next to him, and he only sees the shadows in the, like, from the wall, and also the voice that comes from the wall, he would believe that the shadows in the wall is the only thing that exists. And say he escapes and leaves this cave, and he sees the whole world with plants and all these animals, he'll be too frightened, and he would go back into his cave because it's like the comfort and safety of his own home, right? And that's what he was taught to believe in from an early age. And so, like, as our society develops, how do you think people will react to this if it is proven true or so?
Eugene, in that case, do you think even the man's world, in a sense, was only in the cave?
Mm-hmm.
But do you think it would be better for him to know that a world beyond exists, even though he's happy being in the cave?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about that? No, basically what I mean is, if he's happy in the cave,
Like, what
even though
reasons
a
are
world
there, right?
exists, that's why like and just before the question, that's why like even parents, they don't tell their kids about the dangers of the world at a small age, right? Because that's the age where the child should like. That's why kids are deemed like innocent because they don't really know the harsh realities of life. So why, when we grow up, are we exposed to those things?
Like, go back to your question about the man in the cave. What reason does he have to go out and explore the further world? Because he's all right being in there. There's no reason for him to bring himself out of his comfort zone just to get surprised with a bunch of new things, right? Do you think? Okay, wait.
I think Eugene, it's just curiosity, right? That even like as a kid, you only discover new things because you're curious about what's beyond. Like
Exactly.
that's why that's how you learn in a sense, where you're curious about something, so you try to find out about it. And I think humans are curious, as I've said before, about what life is.
So curiosity really drives this whole inventions
That's what I
and
think, yeah.
Development, right? So, do you think curiosity? Well, coming back towards the topic of like living in a simulation, do you think our curiosity is kind of like what the people above told us to believe in, or is it free will? Like,
What do you
is
mean
it-
by the people above?
Like,
Like
say we're in a
the-
simulation, and then you know how people like they give us a set of rules. Atoms will work this way. Your electrons,
Like
whatever, right?
attributes or something.
Like the laws
Right.
of thermodynamics and everything. And you said that like, do they give us the traits of this curiosity, so that we can like develop new things and work our way, and like the same thing with like memory, consciousness, and like emotions, basically.
Bro, I think it's really hard to kind of look at it from the eyes of someone who's basically creating a simulation. Because, for example, you take the smartest insect, like if you have an ant, okay, you take the smartest ant out of all the ants that exist in the world, and you bring it to one of the like dumbest humans. It still won't be able to understand concepts like relaxation or things like that because it's essentially just not hardwired that way, right? And I think
It's not physically
Right,
able
right,
to
right, right,
comprehend.
right.
Yeah, so we just don't know enough about that. Like we can.
And
So,
I
yeah, we
think
can't make a
our
judgment.
our brain and our consciousness isn't as evolved to kind of process those things. Like an ant wouldn't be able to understand our mindset. We might not be able to understand someone who's above us, someone who's more
Exactly.
evolved.
So okay, so uh, we know that humans have our limitations. We don't know everything that's happening in this world. So if in the case that we are living in a simulation and that there is some kind of god or person that is controlling everything, that means that opens up a whole new like door towards the complexity of the entire universe. How much we could just be 1% of like hundreds of other simulations with completely different rules and
Yeah, exactly. Because the universe is just so big, and I don't know what, but we just haven't managed to find any other extraterrestrial life.
And we're really
Like,
lucky. Like Earth is in the Goldilocks zone,
exactly, yeah.
and like it's like
Everything just
right,
happens
right,
to be
right,
that way.
right. And
Uh-huh.
even like the Big Bang, in a sense, in a place where there's nothing, how did a bang even occur, right?
Exactly.
Like how did the universe start expanding? So just yeah.
So maybe that was like the beginning of like a video game, perhaps,
Right,
where they
right,
just
right.
say, "Oh,
Opening
your world
sequence."
your world is gonna start with like 2 meteorites crashing, right?" And so yeah,
I've never actually been able to understand how did the scientists actually come up with that theory
Yeah.
scientifically.
I'm not too
'Cause-
sure.
Yeah, bro, I don't know.
I feel like
yeah, dude. I think
how do they derive that from
I
like
think
back
most
in the day?
people, like when we kind of hear something related to science or when we see news, we just accept it, right? And that's why the idea people are starting to think about simulations because they're like, why should we just accept what we're told? And My bad. On one hand, this is good because it makes people question things and
Yeah.
not just blindly believe. But on the other hand, you have people who just question everything, even though you should not question everything. You know, so you should just accept some things. For example, if a friend tells you, "Dude, I'm not feeling too good today. I don't want to talk," you wouldn't like pry into the person and be like, "No, tell me, no, tell me." I guess it's just like that, but on a societal scale.
Okay, so I say we move on to a different like topic or thought. So in this, let's assume we live in this simulation. It's kind of like a game, and we're characters in it. Do you think you're the main character, and that everything around you is just a prop or a setup that is meant to like prompt you to make your decisions
I
and
hope I
live
am.
like life?
Right.
So
Or are we like something of a much bigger world like Plague Inc., where they just like try and get everyone infected, and maybe like the coronavirus is
Yeah,
like one
right.
of the tests to like
one of the
put,
levels.
yeah, exactly,
or,
put us through. And like there are a lot of like there are parallel universes in which like this is also happening, but different countries react differently and they have different systems in place, and so it's about which universe will come out of this the strongest and be able to survive basically.
Yeah, I mean, if we're the main characters of the simulation, does that mean that we are the ones kind of virtual reality? You know what I mean? Like, are we the ones who created the simulation and put ourselves in it? For example, if I was the main character, am I like a higher being who chose to make a simulation for myself so I could experience how humans think? Or do I just happen to be the main character because of a computational algorithm or something like that? And why should there even be a main character? What if the simulation's trying to solve a problem? What if the aliens are running a million simulations and
Mhm.
hoping that one of them kind of creates the solution to something, right?
oh, so kind of like aliens are using us to try and figure out one of their problems.
And like also how we think and get understanding of how our society functions.
And I'll give you an example. Like recently, the Harvard Smithsonian Institute kind of put together 8,000 computers and they made a 350 million year simulation of the universe.
Mhm.
If we can simulate the universe to such a degree, then
What prevents
Right,
future
right,
generations from
right.
simulating
Exactly,
us, right? So it's this constant loophole of how technology evolves, and then
Mhm.
they put us in a simulation, we put other people in a simulation, like video games.
Because
And,
essentially technology development isn't supposed to slow down anytime soon. And if
Exactly,
you look at the
uh-huh.
curve, it's very, very exponential. And like, for example, the time it would take you to get from one processing power to two used to be like 10 years or 20 years, and now it
it's
would be like,
exponential,
right.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
So do you guys think at this rate we might be close to coming to a conclusion about our how our entire universe works?
I think to do that, we
Or
need
do
to
you-
overcome some hurdles, like,
Mhm.
for example,
Of course
climate
it-
change
yeah.
and diseases and things like that. I think so. It's kind of the idea of like utopia, right? So on one hand, if humanity keeps going as it is, we'll reach a dystopia where everything's broken down. The sky isn't blue anymore. There's always clouds, things like that. Like you've seen like apocalypse movies, right?
And a
on
lot
the
of like books as
right,
well.
right. And on the other hand, you see like utopia, where you have so many sky rises. You have like a society of people who are really calm and evolved, and there's nothing such as fighting. But even in such things, there will always be someone who's poor, right? Someone who's less fortunate than the others, and that kind of just reinforce. Bro, I don't know what I was talking about.
Yeah, I
honestly.
think I can like build onto this. So like basically in the world of utopia, everything is done perfectly, but people don't know that like the skies could be virtual. Basically, people don't know that you're created artificially, and a lot of people actually are trained to think that everything this is normal, and they're trained not to question anything. And like the book Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, in his book he describes a place where it's the utopian world that you described, but then a stranger from another place comes in and he questions everything, and they basically see the problems and what's wrong with this society. And so if our society like turns into a utopian world at one point, I think that it just wouldn't be there would be a lack of development, lack of curiosity, and it would just be a dead world basically.
But Eugene, at the same time, when we think of simulation, we assume that it's a good thing. What if we're put into simulations because someone's trying to exploit us? You know, what if we have like bodies, but they've put something, they're kind of controlling us to think we're living life. What if in out of the simulation we're just lying on a bed and they're extracting something from us, you know?
Exactly.
If you're living a good life on Earth, would you choose to still go to that place where you're essentially a slave, or would you continue to live here?
I think that kind of theory is way too much for
Because
like
The Matrix kind of talked about that, the movie.
If us humans we were able to comprehend everything that was the truth and like what is actually happening to us, I think that's way too much for one person to like take in at once.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone would choose that option to leave, because imagine I just give you an option right now to leave this world and into a brand new
Red
like
pill, blue
environment
pill.
Yeah,
where you
but
have
then
no
you get to,
idea
like,
about.
right.
Yeah.
Would you say that yes, or would you
But
want
you
to
get
stay
to know
here?
like the truth about everything, and like how you were put in here.
That's why like there's a lot of philosophical debates about like the red pill versus the blue pill. Would you choose to see the reality even though it's harsh? Would you choose the truth, or would you rather live a comfortable life?
Exactly.
I think that kind of again just kind of it's I think it's different for each individual. For example, there might be a person who's living a comfortable life, so they might be like, if I've worked hard and I'm living comfortably, I'm like a CEO or something. Why would I choose to go in a world where I'm nothing? Whereas someone who has nothing to lose would be like, why
They
not,
have nothing
right?
to lose, right? So they risk
exactly.
everything.
Right.
And this idea goes back to like the man in the cave. Like he's living comfortable. What has he like? He's got a lot to lose because like if he sees like the real world and all the dangers basically.
Then he just realized he's a caveman and there's like so much technology,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Right.
Oh, do you guys know about an island like towards the south of India called North Sentinel Island?
No.
It's
Sounds pretty futuristic.
it's a island where there's a tribe living on it, and they have had no contact with the outside world since
I've heard of those places.
start of humanity.
Whoa.
And they're right now they're like one of the they're like protected worldwide as like a community where people cannot enter, and they have to keep it that way because they're one of the last forms of humans that don't know about the civilization
and like technology development.
And
right?
I think that humans care a lot about history. Like, humans don't want to tamper with things, you know? And I think that's very recent only because we've started to exploit natural resources and we're seeing like harsh changes that now we're working towards preserving the world in a sense, because humans are thinking that nature is what's given to us, but we should also preserve it. We shouldn't exploit something that's given to us, right? If you get a gift, you wouldn't just play with it until you break it. You would make sure that it's cared for. But on the other hand, what if the world was given to us to exploit, to use the natural resources so we could fulfill our lives? So what do you think about that? Yes.
What is this? Wait, what? Natural wait. To fulfill our lives.
Okay, so what if the world's given to us, to humans, as a gift to kind of just use
let us
up?
play with.
Right.
Um,
Like a sandbox.
I think that's what we are doing right now, even though we're not conscious of it. Like, humans have been exploiting the natural resources for so many years. We already know that our planet's slowly dying out because of human activity. Is that what we were made to do when we were set on Earth? I don't know. I think we're meant to. I personally think that humans and the Earth are meant to live like together in harmony and benefit off each other. And I think humans are kind of losing that sense of how we're supposed to be on Earth.
And Henry, that's like really interesting because kind of so many people question, why should I care about my kids if I'm not gonna have kids? Why should I care about my kids' kids, right? And I think it's just the idea that I read somewhere that when we turn 70, all the oil reserves in the world are gonna run out.
Mm-hmm.
So should we try to make sure that they don't run out, or should we be like, oh, we'll be old by that time, so let's just enjoy life while we're young? So what would you guys like rather do? Like honestly.
I think I would try and maintain and preserve the oil reserves because there always is a chance that there is like a new technology that can help us preserve this and then create and pave like a better future for the next generation, right? And so
Right.
giving the next generation a chance to live, a chance to reverse something in a sense.
So just
is,
want
like,
so you just want to have like more time to kind of save the world
exactly,
in a sense.
uh-huh.
Okay.
That would buy you some time.
So, what do you guys think about death? Like, what do you think happens when you die? Do you believe in heaven? Do you believe that that's the end of the simulation, or
I think I
What-
used to think a lot about this kind of stuff, but I've just kind of given up and accepted that humanity, like we can't process something that we will never experience, right?
Yeah.
In a sense, because death is nothing, and we've never in our life experienced nothingness as it is. The closest we get to it is sleeping, but even while sleeping, our brain's active, right?
Yeah.
So I just don't think about death in a sense, you know?
How have you guys heard about like the people who like claim they've come back to life?
Right.
They
And they
died
see
for,
like
like-
they
they-
see a light at the end of the
Yeah.
or bro, and I was reading about this that there's so many people like little kids like 3-year-olds, 2-year-olds, when they learn to talk, they start talking about a previous life they lived.
Yeah, the
And
previous life.
Either it's like their parents kind of told them what to say, or it's like it's true. If it's true, then like does this reinforce the idea of religion and like reincarnation, or is this just simulation that they're just using the same person but they're putting it in a kid and they're making the brain like go back like 20
Mhm.
whatever, you know?
So if this was the case, do you think every single person is a kind of reincarnation of a previous life form? Doesn't have to be human.
Henry, I think humans only think about themselves, right? Because we don't really know anyone else that's as advanced as us. So, whatever we perceive our life, even what life is, we do it through the human way, like how we see it. Like, you wouldn't ask an animal how they look at life, right? Because it'll be completely different. You know what I mean? Like, that's why, like, some human tribes, they're like, oh, when it's like some human tribes think it's liberating to die, that only when you die can you live, which is in a sense it might be backwards,
Mm-hmm.
but it's so different from what we, like people like us, believe, that we kind of look at it as something very interesting, you know. And that's why, like, as I've said, humans just cannot
We're just
let me-
not.
let me-
yeah, we're just not smart enough. We just don't have the brain power to compute like what the truth is.
but
and,
but at
like,
the same time, that shouldn't stop you from thinking, right?
exactly.
Because it's our right to kind of think about different ideas and stuff. So what I wanted to come here and just kind of put out there is that even though we might not be able to process things, even though what we're thinking might not actually be the truth, it's really important to keep thinking, to keep like having new beliefs, because essentially that's what makes us human, right? That's what makes us us.
Mm-hmm. So as humans, I think it's important that we understand the position we're in, but also maintain this curiosity and continue searching for answers, looking for this higher power or whatever, and continually developing in every aspect to just see where it leads us and also give meaning to our
Because
lives.
that's
right?
what makes us humans, right?
Exactly.
That's what makes us us.
I say ultimately, I think humans should continue focusing on what actually matters to us,
Mhm.
the events that we can control, things like being in a simulation that's out of our control, and I don't think that should be our priority to think about right now. We still have many problems out there which we need to put our mind to first, such as climate change, like you said.
I feel like that's a really positive
Yeah.
mindset,
Yeah.
because it kind of teaches you to
Mm-hmm.
live in the present instead of looking at the past or the future.
But also kind of thinking about
Right.
the future
Right.
and never just being
Not being
satisfied
reckless, yeah,
with
not
where
being
you
reckless.
are. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yep.
Alright, so I think that brings
That brings us
to the end.
to the end of this episode. Thank you guys for listening all the way through. If you guys have made it this far,
Good
Oh,
job.
sure.
thank
You
you so
must be
much.
a lot smarter after this podcast. Let
Yes.
me tell you that.
Thank you for putting up with our nonsense and our
We'll see you guys
thoughtless-
next time. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, and leave a comment.
My IG's in the description.
And leave a comment on what you guys want to see in the future. Peace.